They came before sunrise. 40 horses cut through the fog, hooves sinking into wet Virginia soil, leather creaking, rifles tied tight. No banners, no chants, just white masks and quiet confidence. They weren't hunting an army. They weren't hunting a gang. They were set for one boy. His name never made it into court records. No birth certificate. No grave. But every man on those horses knew the rumor. A black boy, too young to fear, too quiet to track, and somehow impossible to catch. 3 nights earlier, a KKK patrol had vanished near the river bend. No bodies, no blood, just abandoned torches and one horse still tied, still breathing. The elders said it was coincidence. The riders didn't believe that. So they sent 40. The boy lived at the edge of a logging settlement, a place whites stopped naming once the war ended. His cabin leaned like it was tired of standing. Smoke hadn't risen from its chimney in weeks. They surrounded the woods first. That was the plan. Cut off escape. Squeeze inward. But the forest didn't cooperate. Fog thickened between the trees. Sounds warped. A snapped twig sounded like footsteps. Footsteps echoed like whispers. One rider raised his hand. They stopped. Something moved. Not running. Watching. A shot cracked the air. Then silence. No scream. No thud. Just a horse screaming as it bolted, reins dragging, rider gone. They tightened the circle. Another shot. Another horse loose. Men began firing into trees now, wild, angry. Bark exploded. Birds fled. Still no boy. Minutes passed. Or hours. No one could tell. That's when the first mask was found, hanging from a branch. Empty. Someone laughed, nervous, forced. Then another mask dropped at their feet. And another. Panic crept in sideways. Not fear yet. Confusion. They tried to regroup. That's when the woods answered. A scream. Close. Too close. Then gunfire, not theirs. One rider fell forward, chest caved in, like he'd hit a wall. Another dropped clutching his neck, choking on nothing anyone could see. Men turned on each other, shouting names that didn't matter. Horses reared. Rifles jammed. Fog swallowed directions. They never saw the boy's face, only his work. By morning the fog lifted. The logging road was empty. No horses, no bodies, no weapons. Just 40 white robes folded neatly at the edge of the trees, stacked like laundry, each with a mask laid on top. Authorities came weeks later. Asked questions no one answered. Searched woods that gave nothing back. The case was closed without words. No arrests. No deaths officially recorded. History books skipped the page. But locals still avoid that stretch of forest. They say sometimes before dawn you can hear horses stopping suddenly, as if something is standing in the road. Waiting, and somewhere in that silence, a boy who was never caught. They tried to explain it away. Animals, runaways, Union deserters who never went home. But 40 armed men didn't vanish because of bad luck. The sheriff filed a report anyway, One page, mostly blank. No names, no causes, just a line at the bottom. Search suspended due to lack of evidence. What he didn't write was what his deputy found 3 days later. A rifle, leaning against a tree at the river bend. Clean, loaded, carefully placed. Beside it, pressed into the mud, were footprints. Bare feet. Small. Too small to belong to any man they'd sent. The deputy said nothing. He'd picked up the rifle, felt its weight, then put it back exactly where it was. Later he would swear the forest felt like it was breathing. Word traveled faster than reports. Plantations along the county line went quiet. Patrols stopped riding at night. Meetings were postponed. Crosses stayed unlit. Because the pattern didn't stop. 2 weeks later, another group went missing. Not 40 this time. Only 6. A scouting party sent to prove the stories wrong. They never reached the river. One horse returned alone, saddle slashed clean through, reins cut like someone didn't want it followed. Pinned to the saddle was a scrap of cloth. White, folded once. That was when the name began to circulate. Not a real name, a warning. They called him the boy in the trees. Some said he was born enslaved on a tobacco farm upriver, learned the woods while others learned to bow. Some whispered he'd watched his mother sold, his father beaten, his sister disappear into wagons that never came back. Others claimed he wasn't alone, that the forest itself moved when he moved. No one agreed on the truth. They agreed on one thing. If you went looking for him, you didn't come back. The elders met in secret, decided to wait him out. Hunger always won, they said. Winter would finish what fear couldn't. Winter came. The boy stayed. Fires still burned deep in the woods, small, smokeless, gone by morning. Traps were sprung, emptied, reset. Food stores vanished without locks breaking. Once a group followed tracks after fresh snow. The footprints led them in a wide circle and ended at a tree trunk. Above them, carved into the bark, was a message. Not deep, not angry, just precise. Go home. They did. Spring arrived, and with it, silence. No more patrols vanished. No more masks fell from trees. The forest returned to being just trees. Years later, railroads cut through the land. Surveyors mapped what had never wanted to be mapped. Towns rose where camps once hid. They named roads after men who never came back. They never named the boy. But old men would still lower their voices when passing the river bend. And mothers would pull their sons closer when fog rolled in at dawn. Because history recorded only silence. But silence in that place meant someone had survived. Decades later, a schoolhouse stood where the river once curved wild. Chalkboards replaced warning signs. Children memorized dates instead of listening for footsteps. But the land never forgot. In 1912, a bridge crew refused to work past sunset near the old bend. Said their tools went missing. Said they heard branches snapping in patterns, slow, deliberate, like someone counting. The foreman laughed. Until one morning he found his clipboard nailed to a post. No threat, no blood. Just a sentence written in charcoal. You are standing where they hunted a child. The bridge was finished somewhere else. Historians would later argue the story was exaggerated, that 40 men disappearing at once would have left records, graves, lawsuits. But records depend on who writes them, and graves depend on who's allowed to be buried. There were ledgers that never made it to courthouses, letters burned before wives could read them, men who came home and never spoke again, who flinched at trees, who sold their rifles, who drank themselves into quiet. One of them lived long enough to confess. He was nearly 90 when he spoke, blind in one eye, hands shaking. He told his grandson the truth one night when sleep wouldn't come. They never saw the boy's face. Not once. They heard him first. A stone striking metal, a branch snapping behind them, a whistle that wasn't human, sharp, rising, then gone. Men turned on each other, fired into shadows, rode in circles until horses collapsed. And when panic set in, that's when he moved. One at a time. Not fast, patient. The old man cried when he reached the end of the story, said the worst part wasn't the fear, it was the realization. The boy wasn't chasing them, he was herding them toward the river, toward the mud, toward the place where sound died and rifles jammed and men slipped screaming into water that pulled them under. When the grandson asked why no one ever caught him, the old man shook his head. Because he never wanted to be found, he said. He wanted us to remember. The boy vanished as quietly as he appeared. Some say he crossed north. Some say he lived out his life deep in the hills, never speaking his name again. Some say he died young and the woods carried on the work without him. History never decided, but silence did, because in that county no group ever rode out like that again. Not for a boy, not for anyone. And when people ask why there are places with no markers, no plaques, no monuments, why certain stories are only told at night, the answer is simple. Some victories were never meant to be celebrated. They were meant to be left alone. Years passed. Then years passed again. New owners took the land. New fences cut through old paths. The river was narrowed, straightened, controlled, at least on maps. But nothing ever grew quite right near the bend. Crops failed in neat rows. Animals refused certain clearings. Dogs would whine and dig, then stop suddenly, ears flat, as if something had warned them. No one asked why. In 1936, during a drought, the river receded enough to expose what had long been hidden. Boots. Not skeletons, not bones, just boots. Leather hardened by water, still upright in the mud, as if the men wearing them had stepped down and never come. County officials ordered them removed quietly. No photographs, no reports. The workers who pulled them free were paid double and told to forget. They didn't. One of them told his daughter years later that the mud felt warm, not hot, just alive. She laughed then. She didn't laugh when she grew up and realized no one in their family ever crossed that bridge at night. The story survived the way dangerous truths always do, fractured, whispered, dismissed, repeated. Church basements, barber shops, back porches after midnight. Each version changed details. the number of riders, the season, the reason. But every version ended the same way. They sent many, they came back none. And it all began with a boy they believe didn't matter. History prefers names it can frame as heroes or villains. This story offered neither. Only consequence. Only silence. That is why textbooks never touched it. Why monuments skip the bend. Why maps show nothing where something very real happened. Because the moment you explain it, you admit it. That power can slip. That fear can reverse. That even the smallest figure, pushed far enough, can bend history without asking permission. Some nights, fog still settles there first. Drivers slow down without knowing why. Radios crackle. Engines stall for no reason anyone can prove. And if you listen, really listen, you don't hear screams. You hear hooves stopping. You hear men realizing too late that numbers mean nothing when the land itself refuses to help you. And somewhere in that quiet, a boy grows up. No one ever recorded what became of him. There was no census line for a boy who learned to disappear. No enlistment record, no headstone, but traces lingered. In the 1950s, an elderly black man lived alone near the foothills 2 counties west. He trapped, fished, spoke little. Children said he knew the woods better than the rangers. Hunters noticed he never missed a shot, not because he fired often, but because he never needed to. When asked where he was from, he'd smile and say, "From where people stopped chasing." That was all. He died one winter without family. The cabin was cleared. Inside they found almost nothing. No photographs, no letters. Just a folded white cloth at the bottom of a wooden chest. And beneath it, scratched into the wood with careful hands. They came looking for one. That line was never explained. The county auctioned the land. The cabin was torn down. Trees reclaimed the clearing within a year. And the story did what stories always do when they're inconvenient. It faded. Not completely. Just enough to survive in the margins. Today, if you search archives, you won't find 40 missing men listed together. You'll find resignations, transfers, moved west, cause unknown. History prefers paperwork to patterns. But patterns don't disappear just because you ignore them. They wait. They echo. They resurface when someone asks the wrong question or the right one. Like why that stretch of river has no photographs before 1900. Why no one ever built there twice. Why old families changed their names and moved. Why silence followed a single boy longer than any posse ever could. They sent 40 riders for one child. History recorded nothing. And yet, everything changed. After that, nothing more happened. And that was the point. No reprisals. No replacements. No second attempt. The order was never spoken, but it was understood. Some places were no longer worth the cost. Years later, when younger men asked why patrol routes curved around that forest, the answers were vague. Bad ground. Nothing there. Old trouble. They were taught to look away, because the lesson had already been learned the hard way. Power didn't fail loudly that night. It failed quietly, systematically, without witnesses. and that frightened people far more than open rebellion ever could. The boy never became a legend with songs or statues. He didn't need to. He became a boundary, a line no one crossed again. History calls that silence. But silence isn't emptiness. It's the sound of something that worked so well, no one dared repeat the mistake.